Thank you.
There you go.
Yep.
Sorry about that, Jen.
No, it's okay. The feedback that we gather from these town hall listening sessions and from the two public facing listening sessions will be considered by our contractors and by the task force members, and a final draft of a report with recommendations will be generated, which will obviously be the basis for future decision making and discussions, both with the legislature, but within our own subject matter groups. So with that, I'm going to turn things over to Mission Critical Partners to walk us through a couple slides before we take your feedback and input. But again, thank you so much for taking the time to be here. And if you do not have the interest in speaking publicly, you can always email the task force at our email address that we're going to share. And you can also go to our website and fill out a fillable form to provide feedback if doing so in this meeting is not your preference. Take it away, Bonnie.
All right, Jen, I think there's a couple more slides for you, but we'll just jump right into a little bit of housekeeping. As you just heard Jen say, or well, me say, we are recording this session so that we can go back and make sure that we have people's information captured as far as your comments and feedback and in your own voice. We do encourage you to use the chat feature as well when we start walking through each section. That's going to be very helpful for us as MCP when we're looking and considering each of the comments. And again, it's because it's coming in across in your own words. When asking questions and we get interactive, please do let us know your name and your organization. And as a kind of reminder, the town hall meetings, these are focused. This is really from the public safety practitioners, government officials. We do have separate community listening sessions, but we're looking at the content of the working draft of the system design plan. Jen, you want to give an update on the task force and its members?
Sure. The task force is made up of 7 people as designated by statute. And we've been meeting weekly, well, every other week, initially weekly, then every other week since late June of 2023. So like I said, 1 year and 3 quarters. And there is a slide that I think we're going to get to that shows you the smiling faces of the task force members. There you go. Barb Neal from the 911 board and I are the co-chairs. Paul White is the vice chair. He previously served as the chair of the regional dispatch working group that preceded this task force. Jim Mack from the Shelburne PSAP represents a PSAP overseen by a municipal police department. And Mike Donges, who is the mayor of Rutland, is the representative of the Vermont League of Cities and Towns. Ron Kumitz represents the Vermont State Firefighters Association. He is the chief in Alberg. And Mike Wright is the emergency medical technician or paramedic representing the Vermont State Ambulance Association. And he is the CEO of Calex Ambulance up in the Northeast Kingdom. So those are the task force members. And as I mentioned, we have been working with 2 different sets of contractors. The first is Televate. Televate is a company that was selected to be the trusted advisor and project manager for the task force. As you can imagine, the task force members all have full-time day jobs and don't have some areas of expertise that are required to navigate effectively in this space and take on a project of this magnitude. So Dom and Rick from Televate have been our trusted advisors and helping us helping Mission Critical Partners on our behalf as they do their work. Mission Critical Partners is the vendor that was selected to do the scope of work articulated in Act 78. And they are the ones who have authored the report that you have read and that we will be discussing today. There is a pretty large team at Mission Critical Partners, and they have expertise in all manner of areas, both technical and operational, that are in play in a project like this.
Awesome. Thanks, Jen. Dom, do you want to give a quick project overview? Where we're at, or should say update?
Sure, absolutely. Thank you, and good morning to everyone. As Jen had mentioned earlier, we have gone through quite an extensive process to get here. The system planning document, which you have reviewed the draft of, is the primary deliverable for the project. We have done extensive inventory collection on the ground in the state. Visited all 37 current dispatch centers throughout the state. We put together an inventory and assessment report, which is currently being reviewed for sensitive information, but will be made public soon. And we have done a number of town halls earlier to get input from the stakeholders such as yourselves. Many of you may have attended those, and a number of public listening sessions as well. And all of that has culminated into development of this plan, this draft plan, which you have in front of you and which we plan to review. We are nearing the end of this project, as I believe the cover letter associated with the report indicated that the review and comment session, it will be open until the end of the end of this month, March 28th. We will be accepting comments up until that time. Those will be reviewed and potentially incorporated into a final document, which we expect to be available in April.
Excellent. Thank you, Dom. And so that kind of gets us to, as Jen said, we're going to have a really quick overview, and that's an update of where we're at. And now we're going to be going into the real meat of the conversation and why you guys are really here. And that's to provide us with some feedback. So if you were in any of the town halls previously, you would have seen this slide. It really all the same stands. We want you to, of course, be present, candid, and respectful. The state is, there's a lot of municipalities and field responders as far as police, fire, EMS agencies, volunteer, career. There's, as Don mentioned, there's 37 communication centers. And so there's a lot of opinions, a lot of different things like that. And so, we want you to listen as partners and what this means, statewide, even though we know that you're going to be very concerned perhaps about your municipality or your agency. Bring us ideas as well. If there's something you don't like, please let us know. But also, what's your alternative? What is your solution to that? And I mentioned thinking big picture. And if we do get off track, we are going to be noting things down. Jason is monitoring, one of our team members. He's monitoring the chat. He's monitoring, of course, the lobby. And you'll be taking notes as well so that we make sure we can capture those things. And if we need to come back around to them. So the first thing, and this is where we're going to start, with getting your feedback, and you can raise your hand. You can throw it in the chat. Let me see if I can get the chat up here on screen. But one of the things we would like to understand, where is the chat? There we go. I just want to be able to see it off to the right if I can. Well, that might not work. All right. So Jason, I'm going to be relying on you. What was your first impression of the system design document as a whole? We're going to dig down into each of the individual sections. But when you first saw the document, when you first laid eyes on it and gave it that, that cursory read through, what was your first impression? I know there's, 28 of you, there's 20 folks participating here. So does anybody want to raise their hand or throw something in chat on what your first impression was? Who's gonna jump in as the first one here? Maybe people have not had their coffee yet this morning. Matthew, do you have any thoughts?
Good morning, Matt Lawless, Shelburne Town Manager here. It's a super impressive result. I really appreciate everybody's time working on it, and it answers a lot of questions that we've had in our community. I was just typing up one specific question. Maybe we could work around part of the redaction here. I totally understand the IT and cybersecurity redactions, but the assessment and risk management discussion, especially on page 9. Um, I don't agree with that redaction. I think it would be super helpful for us to talk about the level of risk and like the urgency of the problem if we are mostly at high risk or don't actually have any high risk issues in your assessment.
Okay,
Thank
appreciate
you.
that. Appreciate that.
So can I
Yeah, go ahead, Jen.
take a quick dive there? When we're doing the redactions, it's very difficult to determine, like, obviously there are things that in order to operationalize change, some people will need to know that information, but we have to also balance that with the risk of bad actors finding vulnerabilities and creating a situation where any one particular center or the state as a whole would be more at risk by exposing the information. So it's a real balancing act. And I would also be interested in finding a way in which we can share a lot more information in a confidential manner. But the problem is, if you put it out there and post it publicly, it's no longer confidential and it likely would not stay inside a small working group. So we're trying to find the right balance that helps us get to the answers without putting our centers or our state further at risk from bad actors.
All right, thanks, Jen. Anybody else, or Jason, do we have anything in chat on first impressions?
The comment we have in chat so far comes from Martha Morse. She says her first impression, she had only 3 business days to read the report after receiving the email.
Okay. Yeah, it's a hefty document. Definitely understand that for sure. That can be a challenge.
I'm not sure on the timing of where she received the email from. This was distributed to the listservs that we have available to us for police, fire, EMS, Vermont League of Cities and Towns, etc. Well over 28th, Friday the 28th, and Monday the 3rd of March. So it's still a compressed timeline, be clear. Like we know that people don't have weeks to read it. And to speak to that, Martha, the timeline is a little bit dependent on trying to deliver a final report while the legislature is still in session, so that if they want to provide next steps or off-season assignments, that they have the opportunity to do so. So appreciate that was a time crunch. 3 days is definitely a short turnaround to be expected to digest something of this size.
And if I can add, we are accepting comments until the 28th, so there still is over 2 weeks to review and provide feedback.
Great. Excellent. Let's hopefully people will wake up a little bit and we'll start getting a little bit more interactive, but let's take a quick look at, I'm trying to actually get a second monitor set up while we're talking here. So the next 3 questions, we're going to be looking at, then we're going to still talk about this as a whole. For those that have had the time to digest it a little bit better. Yep. What is it, or anything, is there anything in particular that you do like about the document? Something that you like is, I mean, even if it's formatting, is something that makes it easy to read, easy to follow. What are the things that you like about the document?
The fundamental conclusion, I think, is correct and probably long overdue. You're
Mhm.
right that there are suburban counties in the country that have the same population and population density as Vermont and do this with one service center. So that's the kind of hard news that we need to receive. So good job convening this diverse group and getting there.
Yeah, appreciate that. It's not always easy to deliver that type of news, especially when from our, this is Televate as well as MCP and of course the task force. I mean, we are from this environment. We are practitioners ourselves. We've in fact, I know Jason Malloy, he is still active in volunteer fire service. So to deliver this type of news, it's not always easy. So we do really appreciate that comment. Anything else that you like about it?
I was just going to say that I think it's very important that we have these choices in front of us. This is not a single dictate, but rather, in most cases, multiple options to consider, multiple options to weigh benefits versus challenges, and I think that's very important as we process how to approach the solutions.
Okay, thank you for that. And actually, I am gonna ask a follow-up on that. Because something that, we wanna make sure that we provide options, but perhaps there is would you like to see more of a definitive recommendation? When you say that, it's nice to see options. Or should that be more of the exploration and the discussion afterwards?
Well, I think it's been clear that we have recommendations, and I think the way that you've tiered them, that is to say, option one is this, option two is that, and given the sort of benefits and challenges, I think that does give us some definitive processing here.
Uh-huh.
It's like going car shopping. You can buy a Chevrolet or you can buy a Mercedes, and there's choices in between. And I think that's really relevant to most of the stakeholders in this. I mean, I'd like to have all the best of everything, but sometimes I just don't have a budget that allows me to afford that. I think that's how this is going to have to go, at least at some at most levels.
Right. Okay. Very nice. Thank you.
Bonnie,
Anybody else?
we do
Oh,
have
yes, go ahead.
one from the chat. And Catherine, I apologize if I butcher your last name, but Catherine Delaurier states this document does well explaining the needs for communications from staffing to technology, does well pointing out our challenges. And also then Elizabeth Wilhite says the demographic data is enlightening for our town, South Royalton.
Okay, great. Thank you. All right, well, how about we, and again, if you think of something else, and we'll get into it in more in depth in each individual section. How about there's some things that you might not like about the document? Something that you'd like, oh, yeah, that just doesn't sit right. Not a fan of that. Anything in particular?
I'm coming from not having read the document, so I want to put that out there. I haven't done that yet.
Okay.
I've only gleaned info, and I kind of wanted to see what people thought so far. I will plan to read it before the next meeting. From what I hear, people are talking about how the population of a city is the same as the state of Vermont, and that cities are served by single dispatch agencies. Having consolidated twice in my career, consolidating dispatch for several dozens of agencies into one center is different, I think, than dispatching for a city who's served by only so many different agencies. And I don't know if that's taken into account into this document. Again, I haven't read it, but it's a lesson I learned. Our dispatching got so complex that people were resigning because each agency comes with their own individual needs and wants and policies, and
Right.
those are difficult to account for.
Right. And where were your, I mean, who is this? What is your name?
Yes, I'm sorry. This is Jim Cronin. I'm with the State Police PSAP in Williston.
Got you. Oh, great. Thanks, Jim. And so I definitely understand that. So when you'll want to be you'll probably like the section on the policy and operations and how that lays out the importance and speaking exactly to what you're talking about, the options for standardization. And that exactly speaks to that, right? We call that like the Burger King, and everybody kind of wants it their way, and the challenges that right that come along with that. So I think that's probably a section that you're going to want to, spend some time in and how we lay that out to provide some standardization, which we heard a lot about a desire for standardization in those initial town halls. So that's probably a good place for you to find some of that information. Anything else about the document that folks might not been feeling really warm and fuzzy about? Yes, Emily.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, so I'm Emily Karaszewski. I'm a representative from Wyndham 6 in the State House. And I actually, not a dislike or even a criticism, I think it's just more of a curiosity about the initial call. So for somebody that is in an emergent situation, how are they, if they're in dead zones, how are they able to get the initial calls out? Vermont does not have the same infrastructure that it did at one point, like in the 80s, where we had call boxes. And I think we rely a lot on self-service. And the state has a lot of dead zones, which I know was pointed out in the report. And so I was just curious for if there was any kind of thought and consideration on how we're going to be able to fill in those links.
Okay. Scott, did you have any feedback on that part, which is, I know, again, we're going to get into that, but as far as options on the cellular coverage for call in or call receipt, I guess.
So, are you talking about cellular calls into a PSAP?
Yeah, so whoever is taking
Oh.
the initial reporting. So say I'm a standard consumer who's gone off the road. And I'm in a dead zone, which I represent down in South Wilmington, Nottingham, and Halifax, and we have a lot of dead zones down there. So how am I able to get the call out if I can't make a call?
So if you don't have cellular coverage in that specific area, your cell phone's not going to work, obviously. It has to be able to connect to a network to be able to work. So the issue with cellular coverage is all of the carriers are private carriers. They all have their own plans as far as, every state, each carrier has what they call a radio access network director generally that's in charge of each state. They have a plan that goes in accordance with their private business plans or business cases they have to meet. And government and public safety can try and influence cell carriers as far as how they deploy their coverage, but they're very, very difficult to mandate it. That being said, however, we did have conversations with the Department of Public Service, the Vermont, and I can't remember the exact title. There's a broadband board in Vermont that has stood up. And the purpose was to administer the BEAD funding that the state is getting under the federal BEAD program. I believe it's in excess of $200 million is coming in for the expansion of broadband services across the state. That expansion also includes those folks working with the cellular carriers to expand cellular coverage, because that is, in fact, wireless broadband coverage. So they have assured us that that is part of their work in helping those carriers to expand the coverage. And right now, an attempt at a collaborative approach between government and the carriers is, in my opinion, the best avenue to go down to expand cellular coverage due to like I said, the carriers are publicly traded, but they're private sector businesses.
So
Does that
Scott,
answer?
can I jump in here for a second? Just say that this is a really important question, and it also is a question that will need to be resolved by decision makers. If decision makers believe that full cell coverage, wall-to-wall cell coverage is important in the state of Vermont, that is a massive, huge, and expensive undertaking. But it is not necessarily implicated. Building a system that has wall-to-wall cell coverage in Vermont is not necessarily implicated by Act 78, which gave us our scope of work. So it could be that our report points out that there are known dead zones, period, end of discussion, or the recommendations, once this work is done and we turn it back towards the legislature, could be that the task force acknowledges these dead zones and recommends that we work on a plan for infill. So it is an issue, and it's an issue for callers in various parts of the state. But this report is not necessarily designed to answer the question of how we get ubiquitous cell service in the state of Vermont.
Oh, I understand that. And actually, my point is not necessarily about having ubiquitous cell service. It's really, my interest is how do we find the best solution to infill? So we can go back to copper lines. They work great. We used to have call boxes along the roads, but we took them out because there was a promise of cellular coverage that isn't able to be met in Vermont. So I'm totally fine if we go back to call boxes. I just want people to be able to make their initial emergency call.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you for that. And Jason, I understand we have a couple of comments in the chat.
Yes, Michelle Hunt, in relation to Mr. Cronin's statement about consolidating, she said that they are still recuperating from the consolidation of 2015. And Martha Morse made the comment, local dispatch agencies being incorporated into a state agency. She's not a fan of that.
Okay, appreciate that. To the consolidation comment, what were the agencies that consolidated that you're talking about in 2015, please?
That's when we dropped from 4 to
The
2.
VSD. Got you. Okay. Yeah, understood. And there's a lot of, I think, lessons that that have been learned, not only probably in the state of Vermont, but I know that as MCP that we've, learned about consolidations from around the country and things that we would want to make sure, if that's the decision, as far as from a physical regionalization perspective, which you've seen a variety of options there, then there are things that we would recommend that go along with that to minimize those impacts. Consolidations are difficult, without a doubt. All right. Anybody else there, Jason?
No, but you have a hand from Ben Whalen.
Oh, Ben?
Good morning. Ben Whalen, Ludlow Fire Chief and previous dispatcher for the state for 10 years. And I spent 18 years working for state government before coming over here. I have some pretty broad concerns about the proposals in general, and I'll start here and hit topic by topic, and we'll go from there. I do want to echo Martha's comment earlier about the timeliness of being able to digest the document. I think we're looking at what, 140-ish pages, 166. And so 166 pages, and I think, and I have all the respect in the world for Michelle Hunt, Jim Cronin, Kate Delorier, but the fact that a PSAP admin has not had the time to actually be able to digest it and look through that, I think really speaks to Martha's comment. So that's kind of number one. I don't think it should be a expedited process to push this through the legislature. It may take a couple of years if it's something that we're going to achieve. And I'll hit those topics here as we go. So one of the things I'd like to...
Are those topics like specific to different sections or the document as a whole?
Well, and I guess, are we just talking document as a whole, or you want to talk sections about it?
Document as a whole for this slide here. Then we're going to dig into each section separately. So that'll help keep it organized.
All right. Document as a whole, I don't think it's feasible.
Okay, appreciate that. All right.
Bonnie,
Yes.
one other chat comment from Matthew Lawless. The report could do more to acknowledge the history of the status quo and the difficulty of change. More onto the key sentence in the report, page 6. The sentence reads, decision to regionalize ultimately rests with local authorities and their willingness to look past what they hypothesize they will lose in favor of focusing on what can be gained throughout the various tiers of regionalization.
Excuse me. All right. Thank you for that. We're gonna let's start getting into the document itself, into each of the sections. I want to make sure that we give enough time here. I'm gonna, I'm figuring kind of section 1 and 2. We're probably not gonna have a lot of comments here on, but section 3 is really where we're probably gonna end up digging in more, and then to Chief, your comments and what you have there. So we're gonna break this down into each individual section. For those that may have not have seen it, you can see the kind of the high level table of contents here on the screen: executive summary, methodology, system design, future opportunities, considerations, and then that's broken down into kind of a discussion on organic and inorganic approaches to regionalization. And then there's 3 tiers of regionalization that we dig into: policy and operations based, technology and shared services based, and then that physical or facilities based. Then we talk about the governance, provide options there. High level on funding and cost sharing. There is still a funding and cost sharing workshop that needs to be accomplished before this document is wrapped up. And then we talk a little bit about a timeline and then the appendices. So that's the breakdown of the system design. So you can, what do you like? What don't you like? Are there any gaps in the executive summary piece of it, which in of itself is several pages long? Those that have read it, did it give a good, did it give you an overview? Chief, was there anything in the executive summary that you had note on?
I will say for me, the same concept of I have some hardships in it, but it then breaks it down into those smaller parts of the document. So I'm happy to discuss those now or wait till we hit different points.
Okay. All right. Just hold on to that then, because that's gonna, whatever you tell us for below is gonna end up, we're gonna have to make the modifications, as it may be relative when we put everything together. Anybody else? Anything with the executive summary? All right. Anything mentioned about anything? Let's talk about the methodology. We kind of we refer back to also, and I know you guys, a lot of people maybe haven't seen the inventory report yet that is referenced, so that could make it challenging. So we did try to put like the insights and trends from the inventory into like an appendix and things like that. So you would have reference. We talk about the town halls. We talk about the method for advancing public safety that we utilized in helping us determine options for, the kind of the good, the better, the even better kind of optional approach, and the desire to seek a pathway toward standards, best practices, those types of things in the industry.
Bonnie, Elizabeth Wilhite had her hand up.
Yes, Elizabeth. Ago.
Sorry, I was just going to say that, so I'm an attorney in Vermont, and I'm the new chair of the South Royalton Public Safety Committee. That's why I'm here with Chief Stallnecker to go back to our town and sort of explain the recommendations. So I'm probably the least experienced person on this call when it comes to these systems. So I apologize if my questions seem remedial.
No,
The
you're
executive
good.
summary, the executive summary was great. I think if you are somebody that works in this field, and this is a very impressive report overall, my only thought is that if I were to give this, which I did, give this to our select board last night, so that they could decide if they wanted to make comments within the time frame, it's not simple enough. So that was my only comment. Sorry.
Good feedback. Thank you very much for that. And thank you for being here. All right. Anything else about the executive summary or the methodology before we get into the main part of the document?
Hey, Bonnie, this is Rick. Do you mind if I ask a follow-up question there?
Please go for it.
So, ma'am, what would you recommend we do to simplify? Do you have a suggestion on how to simplify it so that it could be presented to the select board? That would be helpful if you could provide us some guidance.
Yeah, and I'd be happy to provide a more substantive answer when I understand the report better. But I think it needs to, and this is what I would say about any report like this, not just this kind of report, but if we're going to simplify it for a board like a local select board, it should be, one page. It should have bullet points, not paragraphs. And then if people want to dive into the why of it, they have this 111-page report that they can point to. But for any local select board, especially people that don't have town managers, this is going to be really hard to understand, and also just to have the time to try to understand it, which is why Chief Stalnecker and I are here today to sort of help our select board understand. Once this call's over and I've had more time to think about it, I'm happy to email more substantive suggestions, but I have to be honest with you, I did not understand 50%, maybe more of this report. So whatever I say might not be too helpful right now, other than those comments.
We look forward to getting your feedback in more detail.
Absolutely. Thank you
Sounds
very
good.
much.
Thank you, Bonnie.
All right. Yeah, you're welcome, Rick. All right, let's talk about the system design, the future opportunities, and the considerations. So the different options that were laid out. The first part, we tried to give an overview of organic, inorganic approaches to regionalization and what that means, and some examples. State of Illinois, they mandated that there were any county, any area that had, well, any county that had less than 25,000 residents was only going to have one PSAP, perhaps two as a backup. But so there's, the example of everything coming down from, from a mandate of the state that thou shalt only have, X number of PSAPs. And that's how the state of Illinois and other states that have kind of mandated that. Or, somewhere like, I believe it's the state of Maine, they actually have more of an inorganic process where they provide incentives, more than kind of in the middle, right? They really are encouraging it, and they provide incentives. That's kind of more organic. And then there's places like in Palm Beach County, Florida, where it's really truly organic, of people realizing that, coming together, and they've gone from, in one county, 24 PSAPs down to 13, that, as the largest county in the state of Florida, but, and they are still organically kind of working on that. So, and so these are kind of the approaches, that organic and inorganic, that we've talked about in this section, and the challenges and stuff to each. But we really try to go about things in our recommendations, trying to find that from an organic perspective, since, people are much more inclined to, to work in that direction. But it can be very challenging when you have large issues to work around. And so any thoughts on what you liked, what you didn't like, any gaps in the organic and inorganic approaches to regionalization, which I think is probably another area where we can, make it the language may be more clear for folks like the that was just speaking. Any thoughts? Jason, anything popping up on chat? Anybody typing away?
So Martha Morse just asked, I like some of the examples. Why didn't you go by county? And John Sanders, fire chief for Heartland, says define organic and inorganic in this context.
Did I answer that perhaps, where it's for state mandated versus would be inorganic, and organic is more just, everybody kind of coming together within their own, finding out what works on their own and having a plan moving forward without there being some sort of state mandate to do so. And maybe that's not clear in the document. Maybe we need to take a look back at that and make sure it's a little bit more clear.
Bonnie, this is Paul. Can I jump in for a second?
Absolutely, Paul.
With regard to the organic versus inorganic thing, if you disregard the state police consolidations that Jim Cronin mentioned before, organic consolidation is kind of what Vermont has done over the last half century. Various communities have either decided that it would be better to join with their neighbors to be dispatched, rather than relying on the free service from the state police, which they might not be happy with, or trying to staff their own dispatch center. Communities have come together and, for example, Hartford is an example, or Shelburne, where communities have voluntarily pooled their resources and come together to form a dispatch center. That's the kind of organic consolidation that we're talking about, versus, like you said, versus being mandated by the state that you will consolidate.
Yep. Thank you, Paul. Any other questions about this section or thoughts? Suggestions for changes?
Martha, if you can come off of mute, if you're able to elaborate on your question a little bit, as far as why didn't we go by county? Just wondering which part of the report you're referring to, or what aspect.
Sure, maybe you want to, I don't know, maybe want to wait until we get to that section. But in some of the examples later on in the report, it shows, for example, Hartford picking up, Rutland City. Why go outside of our county? We already have agencies within our county that would like to come to us and be dispatched by us. We just need to get the infrastructure into place and personnel into place, but they are all within Windsor County. And
Hey, Mark, what's
actually,
happening?
Oh, can somebody go on mute, please?
sorry,
Sorry, Martha.
no, that's okay. And that in itself is
Sure, it's a
Whoever
local
is
option
speaking, can you go on mute, please?
that is
Yep,
the
that's fine.
organic.
No,
that is-
just local options tax.
Hold on, let's see if I can find this individual.
I did.
You did. Okay, great. Thank you,
Sorry.
Jason.
So in the, that is the organic, concept.
Yes.
We are providing a service that people want to be a part of, which I like that better than, becoming a state agency and, being given agencies that are outside of our county. That's just my input.
No, I really appreciate that, and think when we were looking at the county or the region, or how to make at least a suggestion on what this could look like, since there's really kind of not a official like county governments and those in Vermont as there are really well defined in other states. One of the things we looked at, especially from a perspective of workforce and things like that, we started with more of a what agencies are closest, more of a geographical approach rather than looking at geopolitical boundaries. That makes sense. So that was our first, our way to, we made these recommendations at this point. I don't think there's anything that we would be saying though that this must go to this agency, right? There should be conversation and dialogue and that's where we refer to something called an alliance profile, which if there is an agency or a move that makes more sense, that those should definitely be explored, especially if it would make that process easier and more successful. And I saw Ben's hand up really quick.
Yeah, I just want to share my appreciation again for Martha's comments, and as a department that is looking at investing in a PSAP that is able to provide high quality fire dispatching, I'm not okay with the current alignment of how those things break down. And I can tell you that the majority of the fire departments and EMS, I can't specifically speak for them, but I think communication on that on the southern end of the state has probably been a little poor, because it's not necessarily something we were looking at as being an issue for us. I have major concerns with that alignment.
Okay. All right. And let's dig into that a little bit more when we get to that section then. So I like the conversation we've had around at least the organic and inorganic. Some things have, naturally happened, as Paul mentioned, over the years, over the decades. And how can that still be promoted? Because that is an opportunity for consolidations we found to actually be more successful than they are, when they're forced. All right. So
Bonnie,
this is where
oh,
go ahead.
Couple of chat comments.
Sure.
So Matthew Lawless, referencing back to the executive summary, acknowledge the optimization goals on page 5 are partly contradictory and require priority setting. Lack of focus here makes it hard to understand. Is the goal cost savings, quality improvement, or both? The state education consultant report has the same problem. Elizabeth Tracy agrees with Martha's point about going by county. And Emily Duncan has a comment that we probably will address when we get to the workforce piece.
Okay. All right. Thank you for all of those. Jason, can you mention the first one again? What was the?
So
there's something I need to follow up with.
Yeah, Matthew Lawless feels that the executive summary, page 5, is partly contradictory of itself and requires priority setting.
Yes, the priority settings. Okay.
Yeah, and the general question is the goal cost savings, quality improvement, or both?
Right, and I think it is both. A combination of, but yes, the priority, really appreciate that. And if they're kind of, when we follow up on this and you want to submit more detailed comments, perhaps what would you suggest those priorities are, or that list? What are your your top priorities in that list? Is something we would really like to kind of get a bearing on. Okay, now that you've kind of seen things laid out. All right, so as we mentioned, the three, when we talk about regionalization, we look at it from a 3-tier type of position. Policy and operations based being that actually tier 3. That's kind of like the more overarching. That's kind of where the standardization training, these types of things that can be promoted, from a statewide perspective or a regional perspective. People can come together and have those conversations and commit to those things. It has a broader, you know, capability to have impact. And then the tier 2, which I mentioned before, that is systems and shared services and sharing of technology. That again, maybe, yes, it can be a statewide perspective, but more regional. If there's maybe like Martha, you mentioned like counties or things like that, where things can happen more regionalized. It kind of usually has a smaller area of coverage, but it can again be state. And then that tier 1, that's when we talk about physical consolidation, and that really brings it down even from a narrower perspective, or how many agencies or how many PSAPs, communication centers, would be involved in each of that. So it is a tiered approach. So policy and operations based regionalization. So we talk about, and I'm gonna do this really quick. This is the redacted version that I'm gonna pop up here, just so we can have a little bit of a different visual. Let me scroll down. Sorry if I'm making anybody dizzy. Don't mean to. All right, where is probably should have brought this. So we talk about this and policy and operations based from support, then operations itself, and the workforce. And I know, Jason, you had somebody that had a comment probably relative to the workforce. So in this section, policies and operations based, what did you like? What didn't you like? What gaps are there? What suggestions do you have?
So the comment that Emily Karras Duncan had, and she just also said she has to leave the call to go to committee. But her comment was, as far as the workforce, there may be an avenue through CTE, career tech and ed programs, especially in the adult education section.
Okay. Good to have programs that are being successful and working to point to and potentially emulate. Great, thank you for that. What did you like? What didn't you like? Any gaps that you see that you would like us to try and close?
So I have a question. The support section is specifically, am I reading it correctly, to that it is about providing overall IT, the radio systems, and GIS, and that's what support is about. So the support is recommending a statewide consistency for those items. Is that correct?
Yes, so this is outside of the actual operations, the primary operations, those, that the general, as you see here, the general IT, GIS, radio system support, those technical, that is also related then to performance management, your
Okay, what's performance management?
So quality assurance. So making sure that calls are, handled in alignment with policy and procedure, any protocols that are used, those types of things.
Okay.
Okay. Any clerical, admin, facilities maintenance staff, all of that kind of goes into your support category there.
And is there
kind
a
of
way
the behind the scenes people, you know what I mean?
Yeah. Is there a way to decide like you like option 1 for support, option 2 for operations, and option 3 for workforce? Is there a way to combine those in that way, or are the options inextricably linked throughout those 3?
I think that's how we envision that this would lay out, that they could be individual, you could look at them separately, right? So you could take standardized QA, quality assurance, performance management that I just talked about. And you could pick something from almost like a menu, right?
Yeah.
A la carte, right? Okay,
Right.
what do we like here in support options? And then going back to, okay, well, what is it in operations in each of these buckets? And
Right.
then what is about the workforce? So yeah,
Right.
the conversation about and exploring which options to ultimately take is seeing, well, what is the cascading effect between these, right?
Right. Right. Okay.
Thank
I
you.
guess that was my question. Thank you.
Okay, yeah, thank you for that. Any other thoughts on this? This is again the broader, we heard a lot about the, trying to build on statewide training that's already in place and working in many aspects on actually the 911 side of things, and how can we take and learn from that? How can we duplicate that toward the dispatch side of this to provide consistency, to provide more training, to provide standardization of how calls are transferred, the information that's shared with that. We just, again, we heard a lot about in the original town halls and things about more about inconsistencies and
Excuse me, Barney,
challenges.
Ben
Yes.
has his hand up.
Yes, Ben.
All right, I'll try and if I'm jumping in different parts here. So as far as the support service, does that include radio installation and maintenance?
I think the point is that we could have the opportunity to define it to include whatever the consensus is that it should include. I don't think that it necessarily means that at the time we wrote this report, the report was written that was contemplated. But when we talk about support services or operations or workforce, those are all things that we can build and shrink or contract based on what the feedback is that MCP gives us and what they recommend as seeing as best practices across the country.
Okay, and I appreciate that. I feel it's an important question based on if the idea is to go to a state agency that's running all these things, what is the support process for that? And is it actually something that can be managed? And again, is it feasible? So if the state's radio folks have to take this all on, are they actually able to provide the amount of maintenance that would be required? And who's then paying the bill for those things with repeaters and all of the infrastructure that goes with it? So I'm curious on just, I think that's something that needs to be thought about because that's a big dollar item. And then as far as I do think, certainly having operations and protocols, planning, training that are all related are getting everybody on the same page. I think that is good forward thinking. Again, having been a dispatcher for the state for 10 years, I have no interest in going to a state police PSAP because they provide, in my opinion, police dispatching. They do not provide fire and EMS dispatching at a quality level that I would have any interest in. And so how do you take those folks and then it will take a long time to get them there into that place. And as far as the workforce and training and staffing, I think lots of you have experience with consolidation. I was part of that as a dispatcher. I was fortunate enough that my PSAP stayed within 10 miles of where I was. But those people are not just going to, I'm going to use Manchester as an example of a dispatch center that is, and as we talk about this later on, potentially not part of this plan, but has good quality dispatchers, but they're not going to drive 2.5 hours round trip to go help staff another PSAP. And I don't think there's probably a PSAP out here that's going to say that they have good luck at staffing at this time. So when you start adding 70 to 80,000 calls per year, and a call can't be just considered a 1 hour or it's a 1 minute thing when calls take hours at a time. So I have again, that feasibility piece. But back to the support, I think that's something that needs to be figured out before this is brought forward. Thank you.
Thank you. I know we have Ben and Loretta. You guys have your hands raised. Ben, you want to go? Oh, no, that was Ben, right?
That was Ben.
Sorry, Loretta.
Good morning. Thank you. I'm just gonna kind of piggyback off of Ben. A year and a half ago now, I transitioned to Hartford, dispatching off of state dispatching, trying to alleviate some of the congestion in state. I had a real difficult time with the support through the state radio communications. It was told to me that municipal departments will be able to, share towers and whatnot with the state, but I had a real problem with sharing getting the state radio guys to want to do anything for me. And I'm still waiting. I still have some bad radio spots in town because I'm still waiting on the state radio guys to decide if they can do something for me or not. So that's a real concern about, I get they're a state agency and the state is their number one priority, but what happens when we consolidate and the little guys get left out?
Yeah, Loretta, completely understand that and really appreciate that comment. And I think that's part of what is going to be the challenge here moving forward, right? Is there has been, like you're saying, concerning experiences in the past, and then carrying those feelings and those experiences forward is going to be the, how does the state overcome that? How do even the agencies overcome that when they're trying to make these decisions, and what's the path forward that they want to take? So that is part of the challenges, because what is now, and what we found in the analysis of the inventory and all of that have kind of been the foundation for these recommendations. That's based in a lot of those experiences. So is this, from there, how do we make it better, and the focus on and addressing those problems and those issues head on as part of the conversation on which path the state decides to take. And that, you're spot on that. It is a big challenge, because a lot of people won't want to make a change because they've had a bad experience in the past. But are there ways that we can make it better? All right. Let's in the interest of time, I just wanted to time check. It is a 9:05. And we were having 90 minutes, so I want to make sure that we kind of continue to move forward here. That was policy and operations based. Talk about the technology in shared systems, the tier 2, which we heard a lot about Valcor. We heard a lot about, and you saw recommendations about, CAD to CAD. This is also where the radio system discussion lies as well. And so let's dive into the technology and shared systems based section. Things that you liked, don't like, any gaps in that you might see, and how we can close those gaps. Now let's switch back over. No, sorry, make people dizzy. While I'm scrolling, anybody want to jump in? On technology and shared services? All right. So this is the technology and shared services section right here.
Ben has another comment.
Go ahead, Ben.
And again, read this quickly, but I was having difficulty, I guess, trying to understand if we are going to move away from Valcor or not.
I don't believe we specifically we MCP in our recommendation specifically indicated moving away from a particular technology or not, rather focusing on, again, standardization, things like CAD to CAD, being able to reduce or eliminate call transfers, and and how that could now, I mean, if Valcor can provide those, then right. So I don't think we ever mentioned about staying with or selecting one technology over another. We based it more on kind of a requirements or objectives based on what that can provide and how it can improve operations.
Okay, I just was trying to, as I read it the first time, I took it as a staying with a specific system, and then as I tried to quickly reread parts of it this morning, kind of read it as you're saying, and I just wanted to confirm that we're kind of at least leaving that open-minded and open-ended, so that if a better option is available, that maybe it is picked.
Yeah,
Yep.
Ben, I don't think it's the role of our consultants to say we should or shouldn't stick with a certain vendor or contract. I think that's the role of the task force, and based on the feedback we get, to make recommendations about how to proceed once we get a final draft report. So we're certainly open to hearing feedback about that. I think the report does a good job of indicating that Valcor was not intended or created as a fire or EMS CAD system, and the lack of functionality obviously is something they highlight in that arena. So I think those are recommendations that we have to make, and not rely on our vendor to tell us to dump one product or go shift to another.
Thank you, ma'am.
Yep. And thank you for that, Jen, because MCP, we are very much in our we are vendor agnostic, vendor net neutral. We typically will talk about processes and, again, objectives and client requirements, but to say and select one vendor over another, that is something that we do not do for that reason. I mean, we don't like, we don't want people to think that we are proponents of one vendor over another. We're looking for what's the best solution for the state, for the client, for the agencies. So thank you for that. Any other thoughts on the technology? Yes, Jason, what you got?
Michelle Hunt, she's with one of the state PSCTFs. She made the comment, Valcor was not designed to support an agency of their size.
Okay. And which agency is she with? I'm sorry.
She's with VSP. She's with one of the state PSCTFs.
Okay, got you. And Michelle, what can you expand on that a little bit more? In what way? What are some of the challenges? And again, we heard a lot when we did the original town halls and the discussions, and when we were on site, what are some examples you have?
I'm sure you did. We just, because we are spread out all over the state, we're not one, we're one ORI, but we have a bunch of different, barracks, and we move around. It's not like, okay, you're assigned to this one particular ORI, so this is where you stay all the time. And so we have to move people constantly from ORI to ORI, and it's not in a way that makes it easy for us to keep track of our units. And then we have no customization of the dashboard. So we see a lot of things that we don't need to see. Like, there's a lot of fields that we don't care about. We can't sort. So we can't have maybe like our most current, people at the top of our list versus the people that we have that are just, busy for the day at training type of thing. We also have a very hard time juggling calls because of the way that Valcor is designed. If you assign somebody to one thing and then you assign them to another, now they're assigned to two things. So which one are they on? And also when we have a very large incident, so, at VSP, we have special teams. So we could have an event, let's say World Cup at Killington, where we have every special team, plus we have a bunch of field troopers there, plus we have, you know, us from the critical incident dispatch team. We had all these units assigned to this incident, and then now our screen becomes almost you know, incapable of dispatching because it doesn't know how to, you know, properly put these people where they should be so that we can see them or not see them.
There, yeah, definitely a lot of challenges. I believe, you know, we also discussed in the document about, again, I'm going back to a CAD to CAD, you know, approach, you know, where, you know, as one option where, you know, calls come into the PSAPs and then the calls actually are entered right at the PSAPs rather than being transferred. That's something, again, when we talked about, I guess it's, something again that can also be explored, you know, regardless of who the CAD, you know, the CAD vendor is. So I appreciate that. Thank you for voicing some of the challenges again that we have also heard. And so I think as far as the question too earlier, is there is the option here of developing a request for a proposal at the third option here, and you know seeing you know how that would shake out as well as an option from everything from expanding the participation in the Valcor to also going all the way out to a new RFP. So it does span those options. Other comments? Yes.
Two quick chat comments, Bonnie. One from Martha from Hartford. Valcor shouldn't be referred to as a CAD system. It's not a computer-aided dispatching software. It's an RMS system for law. If dispatchers had access to a full CAD system, it would simplify their job. I think it's misinformation in the report referring to it as a CAD system. And there was a request for us to watch time so we can get to the finance section.
Okay, moving on. All right, so physical consolidation. So this is probably where we figure, besides, I guess, funding, probably where most of the conversation may lie. We already heard about the comment about looking at it county rather than geographically. The challenges of consolidation, the idea of thoughts about going to a state, sort of organization. Other comments, likes, dislikes, gaps, and suggestions for closing those gaps on facilities-based regionalization.
Bonnie, there was a chat comment that I had parking lotted that comes back to this section from Elizabeth Wilhite, and I can actually field the answer as well. So the question was, it's not clear to me how this will affect local volunteer fire and rescue departments. If we could discuss that. So Elizabeth, essentially the way that this would occur if a dispatch center is regionalized into one of the PSAPs, whatever agencies that dispatch center currently dispatches for would follow that regionalization. And hopefully that answers your question. If not, we can dig into that a little bit if need be, and we can certainly explain that offline if need be as well.
Thanks, I appreciate that. I will share that with our local department.
Mm-hmm.
And just to further that, essentially the reasoning there quite simply was the continuity of that emergency incident. The 911 call would be fielded and dispatched by the same agency in that respect. That way it reduces the call transfers. It improves the situational awareness between the call takers and the dispatchers and provides other benefits as well.
I will note in here as well that we did just, even up all the way over to option 4, that if there were agencies that did not want to move into one of the into one of the PSAPs or merge with one of the PSAPs, there is that option as well. However, they would be subject to, they'd be self-funded, kind of like the dispatch centers are already. And but they would also then be subject to any of the, the policy and operations-based perhaps requirements, technology requirements, that the other agencies would be as part of the, as part of the physical regionalization. So again, trying to go for that standardization across the state, even if some dispatch centers decided not to merge into a PSAP. And then you can see we also did pull out Mad River Valley and the University of Vermont for their unique, their unique operating environments. And so did not include those as well.
Ben
Any
has his hand up.
Ben?
I will be quick time wise here. I do agree with Martha's concept of more on a county concept. And as I say that, and as we look at the topography of the state, the majority of any mutual aid companies that we would be using are coming out of our same county, and currently primarily from one PSAP, and this would effectively split that to some extent, as it's not within the same county. And as you look at that little map, there's part of southern Windsor County that is cut out of Hartford, which is a change. And yeah, I think that's all I got on this one for right now.
Any other thoughts? All right. Well, let's move on to, I know there was some comments about funding, so let's move on. Come on, if I can, there we go. Well, there was I don't want to forget about governance. Is there anything about the governance section?
I couldn't absorb that part, sorry.
In what way?
There's too much here to read since I saw it yesterday.
Okay. Understood. Now, again, just a reminder, I mean, there is online form and things like that. So, and there's more of these sessions as well. So, you'll have more opportunities. And as you get those, as you do get a chance to digest it, to be able to provide that. This is definitely not one and done type opportunity here.
Bonnie, Chief Stalnecker had a question about the map, about whether or not that was depicting all the police departments, and no, that was depicting just dispatch centers.
Just dispatch centers and PSAPs.
Right. Yeah, I responded to the chief in the chat.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Anything else about governance? All right. Moving on, funding and cost sharing. Funding and cost sharing. I know, Jason, we already have a comment in the chat you mentioned.
Yes, so Matthew Lawless, the section on 22, the communication centers provided budget information. In some cases, information was not entirely complete. That statement within the funding section, his comment is that is a serious shortcoming. Strongly recommend pushing the other 15 to submit data. The key finance pages 110 through 112 are weaker because of that fact. So I guess Jen, Paul, I guess that's a comment more directed towards the task force.
Well, I mean, it would have to be a recommendation that we ask the legislature to mandate it, because we cajoled and suggested, and implored people to cooperate with the work of the task force, but they were not required to. So that could be one of the recommendations that we take forward is that the task force be given some statutory authority to compel agencies to provide their information, but that's just not the way the scope of the work of the task force has been laid out to date.
Okay. Now, understanding again, there is just like we had other planning workshops, we wanted to get through to this, at least a draft document, before we went into that funding and cost sharing workshop. And so there is going to be more discussion around this, more information gathering. This is a very important element, of course, and the costs can vary, widely between the good option to the even better option. So definitely they all agree having the additional budget information, especially from the staffing perspective, is going to be very, very important. Any other question? Yes, go ahead.
Yeah, couple of comments. So I'm going to take these out of order so that we can go through the appropriate section in the report. Okay. So actually, no, I believe these are in order. So Ben would like to go back to page 97 for a moment. Ben, are you referring to the page with the map or the page immediately after that?
The page immediately after, sir.
Okay. Bonnie, it's the landscape page with the numbers. Yep, right there.
Yeah.
Thank you. I know this is jumping back real quick. So I guess as we look at this in these six proposed centers under, I believe this is 4B option. As you look at those added incident volumes and you're looking at, 0, I guess, is great. But increases of 14,000 up to almost 90,000 calls. And that's then shown as additional incidents per hour. But I'd be curious if there's a way of figuring out what the actual increase is during those high volume times that don't include, 2 a.m. to 7 a.m. and specific days of the week, and how much that actually is putting on those centers within those specific times, and what staffing would be then required to hit those markers, and through past experiences and current staffing levels, if they think that they are able to meet those staffing shortages within those specific geographical areas that those PSAPs would be in.
Right. This is not an uncommon question that we get when it comes to, when we start talking about the physical regionalization like this. And it would be an incredibly, I guess, it could be very, not a challenging, I think it kind of goes back to what Jen was just saying about being compelled to provide information. We would need everybody's, and analytics, which we understand for some, they don't track. We didn't even get some incident volume from some agencies, or call volumes from some agencies. They just don't have that data. And so there are assumptions that we would have to make, busiest, we'd need busiest hour, everything, all the call volume, all the incident volume by hour. And so to get, if that's, the commitment to be able to try and get that information, to be able to do that. But that is part of the challenge. Not everybody is equal in their capabilities to provide this information.
Absolutely. I just, that last column, I think, is deceiving based on a 24-hour day. Sure.
And it's interesting because to your point, Ben, I think too, is people look at that and they go, oh my goodness, 56,000 calls, or incidents, how is that? Or the call volume for adding 14,000, 911 calls. And when you start dividing down how many hours there are actually in a year, there's what, 8,700, I believe, some hours in a year. That's where those numbers become, like, from that 14,000, it goes down to 1.6. But you're right, that is distributed over an entire day, which we know that call volume in the, in the afternoons and the mornings, and, is in during the weekdays is more than on the weekends, and things like that. It's just to kind
But
of
you're
give a
also,
perspective,
under
though.
that same concept, you're only thinking about a call lasting an hour.
A call or an incident?
Well, so I guess incidents. You can say incidents per adding incidents per hour, but I think it's not necessarily looking at the duration of those incidents.
Right, then you're going down and looking at, is this officer initiated? Is this something that came in on a 10-digit line versus a 911 call that was transferred? Absolutely. A incredible amount of variables.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you. And we are like at 6:28 or 9:28.
Bonnie, the other chat question was about the governance piece.
Okay.
Will DPS, or did you already discuss with other states included in the report about how different models work? Interested in finding out how the 911 board works versus the State Department.
So maybe there's a little bit of conversation that we can add to that about how that, and yes, we did talk about, start looking at how governance is managed in other states, from radio perspective, 911 perspective, joint board perspective, those types of things, and how that, cascades down to regional governance as well to be able to support. So yes, we've been exploring all of that.
Elizabeth, did that answer your question? Okay, she gave a thumbs up, so thank you.
Okay, great. Thank you, Elizabeth. I do want to mention, I'm going to move on in the interest of time. I mean, we can stay on. We're okay if folks want to just, continue. But I want to be conscientious of people's time. And this is the first one of these we've done. So we're going to be taking some feedback back to kind of streamline this a little bit as well. And so the timeline, something to emphasize here in the timeline is that this is not something that is going to happen overnight, right? Our timeline that we've projected is, 1 to 10 years. And when we say 1, that's talking about some of the other things, like, again, going back to the policy and operations based, or things like that could be starting quicker, while other longer, more complicated challenges, like things like physical regionalization, radio system, or procuring or upgrading, updating CAD, things like that, those can take a lot longer to, fully realize. So there's like a 10-year timeline here. Any comments about that? All right. So the appendices, I'm not going to jump into if somebody has a comment on that. I mean, we did provide a variety of different appendices, including this one. I will show this one appendices where it is, which is a basis of a lot of the recommendations. This chart here, which is a regionalization benchmark criteria roadmap. It talks a lot about various things that are up in the report and that we reference. So, this is a good, and these are in order based on the number of criteria that are met. So when you see in the physical regionalization it being referenced, the 9s and the 8s, that's this table that they're talking about, this far right column down into the 7s. And all the way down. So just wanted to point that out. And with that, again, we haven't even been able to get to this slide. So again, there's going to be some streamlining here. In the original town halls, we talked about top 3 priorities, must-haves, deal breakers, recommendations for system improvements. If you can put it in the chat or you want to, put your hand up. Does anybody feel like these were or have not been addressed so far in this report for them? Kind of bringing it back to kind of the overview, like the higher level outside of the things that were already mentioned.
And Bonnie, just for everyone's benefit, Matt made the comment, doesn't think the average cost given for Shelburne is correct. Might be getting cost efficiency bonus points they don't deserve. Their dispatch budget is under stress and would need much more state support in order to justify expansion rather than contraction. And I did respond in chat. We do understand that some of the cost per variables may be potentially incorrect. And that is due in part to not every agency providing data that we were able to run all the calculations on. But certainly your comment is duly noted. Thank you.
And we did have the inventory report. Each agency, we sent them their section to review the budget information and call volume information that was provided. And so all the agencies, all the communication centers did have an opportunity to take a look at the inventory and validate or provide information that, we could update. Ben?
Again, I have concerns about the feasibility, and I would encourage, as you said in that timeline part, that this, if it is going to go through, will take time. And I would encourage not necessarily trying to push it through this moment. I appreciate the work that everyone has put into it. And I will say, I have failed at educating myself enough in the past, however long this has been happening, because it was not something I necessarily thought would be affecting my local communications. So I will get that word out throughout Upper Valley and try and spread that to Southern Vermont for everyone that's. I think the majority of Southeastern Vermont is done through KMA, and I feel they're probably pretty happy with their service on the fire side and EMS side of things. And they may not know that there may be a organic or inorganic way of them being changed. So I would make sure those things are out there. Again, I appreciate all of everybody's work here. You don't write a 160-page document without time and energy. And I also want to say to all the dispatchers that are out there and the PSAP admins that, you guys keep things going, and your livelihood and everything else is important, and we can't do what we do without you. So that's all I have. Thank you for everyone's time.
Thank you, Ben. All right. Again, I know, Jason, how many people do we still have online?
Including facilitators, 22.
Oh, okay. We've only lost a few. I want to do, as long as everybody's okay, I would like to seriously still do this exercise. I am going to throw something up here though for those that have to drop. Okay, but if anybody wants to, hang out for just a few more minutes. Next steps, we're going to be completing the town halls and community listening sessions. We have to hold the funding workshop, like I mentioned. And then again, as we get all the information, review and consider it, all the feedback we receive, and online feedback, as Dom said, will be accepted through March 25th. Now that's available through the task force, links, and then there's the comments question. But this
That's
document that I was, what was that?
I'm sorry, Bonnie. That's the 28th. So 2
The
weeks
28th.
from this Friday.
Yep. And go into the task force website, you can find the redacted document, and there's a way there to provide your feedback online as well, or it can also be emailed. What I would like to ask really quick is for those in the room still, and if you were in the town halls before, I mean, this is, we went around and did this too. Jason, can you please call out everybody individually around the room, if you would, and ask, what suggestion do they have for the task force to improve this document? I want to make sure that those that maybe have not said anything have an opportunity.
Okay. And I will, of course, I will skip over the task force and consultant representatives.
Yes.
Ben, we'll start with you.
How can we improve the document, Ben? Last thoughts.
I think within that executive summary part, as we talked about in the beginning, I would shorten that, and also maybe in a shorter way discuss the 4 options that you are proposing.
Okay.
But it is 160, well, I guess 166 pages. I stand corrected. It's a lot of information. And it's just a lot. It's a lot to get through. So I think the executive summary could be a little bit better.
Okay.
I also, listen, I'm sure there have been, is with my knowledge of the fire service in Vermont, I'm sure that Commissioner Morrison's had some strong conversations with different leaders of different groups, and I do appreciate VSFA, but I will say there has been no communication from them, and I do not necessarily consider them my voice. And so as we move forward, I struggle with that. And if there is some other concept for this moving forward in a board, I don't think that representation for the fire service, especially in Southern Vermont, really has anybody at all. I don't have a lot of time, so I'm not necessarily saying I'm your person, but I'd be happy to, we need to get this right and not have it just forced down anybody's throat. So if anyone needs my contact info, I'm happy to jump in.
Thanks, Ben. Who's
Right,
next, Jason?
Corey Chase.
Hello. This has been really enlightening. I'm grateful for the chance to hear about it. I'm primarily listening right now, and I'll hold comments until later.
Okay. James Cronin.
Yeah, as I embarrassingly said before, I haven't read it yet, so maybe next time around I'll have something to contribute.
Okay. Next, again, I apologize for any mispronunciations of names. Catherine Delaurier. I believe that may be it.
You said it very well.
Thank you.
So the document, like everybody has said, is long, and it's hard to break down. I had a hard time kind of participating in some of the conversations because even though I did read it, it was hard to process it. So I think I need to read it another time and spend some more time with the document. So somebody had recommended kind of like a bulleted, pointed summary that might be helpful to prompt like my memory in all the different parts of this document.
Okay, some sort of condensed. I don't want to say a visual aid, but some sort of like an even more summarized brief version of the executive summary, even boiling it down into a 1-pager. All right. Okay. Thank you for that.
Next, we have Elizabeth Tracy.
Hi, I'm sorry. I'm dispatching as well as trying to listen, so I'm not 100% sure where you're at. As far as suggestions, I think I've heard bits and pieces. Condensing this into something would be great. Beyond that, I've read through it and I'm still digesting it. I'm thinking about different recommendations, like maybe even 2 fire EMS dispatch centers versus regional dispatch centers, maybe 2 911 centers versus what we currently have, and then leaving law enforcement on their own. But beyond that, I appreciate everybody's time and energy that they've spent in this document, because there certainly is a lot to take, and having been through several consolidations and different reports over the years, this is pretty thorough. So I appreciate your time and thank you. And I'm sure I'll have more to say as we go.
Thank you.
Brett LaRose.
No comments, thank you.
Okay. Martha Morse.
Thank you. Like everybody else, I agree. There's a lot there, summary page for each section, bullet points. What I'm interested in is if there's agencies that are interested in organic consolidation, promoting and supporting that. Also, rather than an agency getting incorporated into, the 911 board overseeing something, maybe working out MOUs to allow an agency to remain part of their municipality, but working with the same goals in mind as what, if the 911 board took over overseeing it, working with their goals and, putting that into an MOU rather than becoming part of a bigger organization.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Matthew Lawless.
Hey, thank you. I think Secretary Morrison was right on to describe the methodological problem that you couldn't compel response, but you need this information. So at the very least, your methodology section has to describe those gaps, that your basic methodology was a self-reporting questionnaire, but many key agencies didn't respond and you didn't have a way to validate what they sent you. So to acknowledge the weakness in the self-reporting and the lack of report. And I worry that those are going to be fatal flaws in the whole document, that you don't have robust enough data to make the kinds of major claims that you're making. Ben Whalen pointed out that not every stakeholder who maybe would have liked to be consulted was, and not all the stakeholders that you wanted to consult with responded to you. So it's a rickety framework. So maybe backing up, the best you could maybe do with this is make a more thorough assessment. And I like the intent and I kind of like the conclusions, but the methodology that's in the middle doesn't connect point A to point B. If my select board was asking me to do a major organal reorg and only 8 of my 13 departments talked to me, I wouldn't be doing my job.
Right. And I want to actually make a clarification there, and I appreciate this comment. This may be an area where we need to bring in more of the inventory and assessment, because in that methodology section, it does talk about some of the assumptions that we had to make. And this, just for clarity too, is not to imply that an agency didn't provide any information. In the self-reporting questionnaire, there may be a gap on the budget or a gap on one other element, but and there were, I think, 5 total. I have to look back, that did not, 4 or 5 total that did not provide. They were just refused at all. But the other ones, it wasn't that they, didn't provide anything. And then they did have an opportunity to, again, to go back and validate what they provided. So, but to your point, though, that is a gap, and that's something that we need to close. So there's a better understanding of where this part was showed up.
Show the quality of
Excellent.
data. That on this question, we got 33 out of 37. And so we have high confidence. On this question, we only got 22 out of 37. And so we have lower confidence.
Right. Okay. Excellent. Thank you for that. Who's next?
And the last individual that's not a task force or consultant member is Tom Andros.
I have nothing to add. Thank you.
Great. All right. Thank you. Jen, do you want to, I just appreciate so much everybody hanging in there. We will make some tweaks and things like this so that we can make sure we get to the substantiveness. Encourage everybody, maybe attend another session if you can. Make sure you submit your thoughts and your questions through the online form or the email. Jen, last over to you.
Yeah, thanks everyone for attending. I'm really interested in your feedback. So if you have more time with the document and have more feedback, please email the task force or fill out the fillable PDF on our website. Really particularly personally interested in feedback around governance and funding, particularly those of you who are in municipal leadership, because those are the two biggest issues out there at the end of the day. So thanks for your attendance, and we'll talk soon.